In the early 2000s, a craze was sweeping the nation. Games like Grand Theft Auto Vice City and Mafia, games where you play as the bad guy instead of a good guy, were becoming more and more popular. You want to run people over with a stolen car? Get in a shootout with the cops? Pay a prostitute to help you recover your health and then use a baseball bat to get your money back? As long as your mom or older brother buys the game for you,
actually, it's his birthday present.
Go crazy, kid. One of the most iconic games from this era, one that in my opinion perfectly distills what growing up in the early 2000s was like, was a crossover between this preteen thirst for over-the-top violence, pro wrestling, and hip-hop. This is Def Jam Vendetta and Fight for New York, two games that could never, ever be made today.
You can't be a pimp if you get owned like a hoe.
In the late 90s and early 2000s, the music genre every kid was falling in love with and every parent was terrified of was hip-hop. The Wu-Tang Clan, Ludacris, DMX. Across North America, white suburban teens were trading their flannel shirts and blue jeans for basketball jerseys and fitted caps. The question for retailers was, how do we make money off this? The answer? Video games. Specifically, sports games. Hip-hop and sports games first crossed paths in 1995. Rap Jam Volume 1 was a basketball game featuring artists like Coolio, LL Cool J, Warren G, and even Queen Latifah. The budding relationship between hip-hop and video games saw the creation of the infamous Wu-Tang Shaolin style in 1999, but it wasn't until the early 2000s until things really took off. At this time, game soundtracks were starting to feature more songs from real artists rather than composing music themselves. Tony Hawk Pro Skater was many a 12-year-old's first introduction to punk and ska. Having a similar effect with hip-hop were sports games developed by Electronic Arts. The theme for Madden 2000 was produced by Ludacris, Exhibit was on Madden 2001, NBA Live 2001 featured Bootsy Collins, and NBA 2K1's theme was produced by Redman. Rappers were even being featured as characters in games, like Q-Tip and Jermaine Dupri in EA's 2000 boxing game, Knockout Kings. So, EA decided to open up a new division called EA Sports. Big. The goal was to create sports games that leaned less into traditional sports like Madden and FIFA, and more into the world of extreme and street sports. The first game they produced was 2001's SSX Tricky, one of the great snowboarding games of all time, which they followed up with NBA Street Volume 1 and 2 in 2001 and 2003 respectively. Volume 1 featured hip-hop tracks from artists like The Herbalizer and the London Funk All-Stars, but Volume 2 took it to the next level, featuring artists like Nate Dogg, Pete Rock and CL Smooth, Just Blaze, Black Sheep, and Redman. With hip-hop artists in the mix, and EA's willingness to go beyond traditional sports games, something cool was bound to happen. But there's one more piece of the puzzle we have to talk about. The late 90s and early 2000s was when pro wrestling was in its attitude era. I'm talking Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, The Rock, Chris Jericho, Stone Cold Steve Austin. During this time, we were getting pay-per-view spots on a nightly basis, and every kid in the USA wanted to be Jeff Hardy hucking swanton bombs off the jungle gym. To capitalize on the fervor, wrestling promotions started making their own video games. All Japan Pro, WCW, and WWF were some of the big names putting out multiple games every year. One of the foremost grappling game developers at the time was a Japanese company called Aki. They were the team behind WWF WrestleMania 2000, Virtual Pro Wrestling 64, and in 1999, they partnered with EA to produce WCW Mayhem. The game was successful enough that EA wanted a sequel, but during production, WCW was purchased by Vince McMahon and the WWE, leaving EA in a bit of a predicament. Suddenly, they had this amazing wrestling game engine and no IP to fill it with. In comes Josh Holmes, the co-creator of NBA Street, who happened to be brought into a brainstorm meeting at EA as they were trying to figure out what to do with the abandoned wrestling game.
And we had come off of NBA Street, we loved street ball culture, we loved urban culture, and we were like, well, what if you did something with hip hop artists and fighting, and they're like, that's genius, we should totally do that. And we're like, oh, no. And we're brainstorming. This is a terrible idea, you should not do this. Like, whatever you do, don't do that. And they're like, no, that's great.
Well, one thing led to another, and the idea eventually made its way to the president of Def Jam Records, Kevin Liles. He himself, a big fan of video games. Next thing he knew, Holmes was put in charge and had 9 months to create a fully fleshed out video game. EA had permission to use anyone signed to the Def Jam label, but each artist had to sign on personally. So, Holmes and Def Jam marketing VP Lauren Wurtzer-Seawood had to fly out to meet with Def Jam musicians individually to convince them that this video game was a good idea for their career. Surprisingly, many were on board, really on board.
They weren't shy in showing, some of those moves off against some of the members of the development team. So, we took a few bruises for the show.
Oh my goodness!
During these meetings, the talent would give their input as to how they wanted to be represented in the game, what their characters would wear, their attitude, their voice lines,
Y'all really think this cat can handle the dog?
and, of course, their finishers, called blazing moves.
He put the dude on his shoulders like this, like he gonna torture rack him like this. Then he swings him like this.
And throws him and drop him face first on his head. He bust out his finisher.
One infamous story involves Ghostface Killah of the Wu-Tang Clan.
We met with Ghostface Killah, and he was hyped about what he wanted, and he sort of described this costume that he wanted, but the thing that he was really, really passionate about is he wanted this like gold bracelet with a giant bird on it. And he's like
a real bird?
Like a bird. It was a gold bird. He wanted a gold bird with like diamond eyes. But he's like, the deal is, my special move is the bird comes to life and it tears out my opponent's eyes. It pecks them out. And Lauren's just like, just say yes, just say yes. I'm like, we can't do that. Like, it's not technically possible. No, just say yes. Just, okay, sure, Ghost, yeah, got it. The bird comes to life, got it.
With the eye-plucking blazing move notably absent on the game's release, the next time the two met, Ghost made sure to remind him of it.
When we went back and did the sequel, he remembered that. He was like, dude, you didn't do my bird. He's like, where's my bird?
This was partly due to EA's resistance to anything overtly violent, which caused friction on the creative side of things. Josh Holmes recounts a moment in the game's story when the main antagonist, D-Mob, pulls a gun on the player. It was supposed to be the game's climax, but shortly before the game was set to release, former president of Worldwide Studios for EA, Don Matrick, tried to get it pulled from the game, saying, quote, "You can't have a gun in this. There are no guns in hip-hop." Huh? How EA could greenlight a hip-hop fighting game during the gangster rap era and expect there to be no guns is almost beyond comprehension.
Stop it!
But thankfully, Josh Holmes and his team pushed back as much as they could to try and remain true to their vision. Despite EA's attempts to hamstring them, they did an excellent job, and even had many of the artists help promote the game of their own accord. Part of Def Jam Vendetta's marketing tour was the Def Jam Tour, which saw Method Man travel around the states to promote the labels as well as the game. Part of the tour had Meth go to local GameStops and play against customers. According to him, he was undefeated for most of the tour.
Holla at your boy, Game Pro.
Until one kid managed to beat him. Although Meth didn't know his name, he refers to him in interviews as a little piece of shit. Thankfully, our story doesn't end with Def Jam Vendetta. After the game's initial success, the people wanted more. EA wanted more. And the team at EA Big did not disappoint. Bigger scope, more characters, and a fundamentally better game. Where Def Jam Vendetta was more of a beat-em-up, its sequel, Fight for New York, was more like a 3D fighting game. One that you could practice and actually get good at. Fight for New York brought in a couple of different fighting styles, making the gameplay more diverse. You could specialize in kickbox, street fighting, martial arts, submission, and wrestling, and take on specific traits from any of the fighting styles to create a character that really fits your style of play. Alternatively, you could pick up and master one of the game's 67 playable characters. Yeah, you heard that right. 67, 44 of whom are based on real people. With the exception of DMX, everyone from Vendetta returned in Fight for New York. On top of this, the game brought in a ton of new artists. Busta Rhymes, Flava Flav, Fat Joe, Ice-T, Exhibit, Warren G, Prodigy, Slick Rick, Sean Paul, and Snoop Dogg. You could play as Kimura, Lil' Kim, and even Carmen Electra. I can't think of any other piece of media that has as much star power as this game here. To make the gameplay more interesting, the venues included interactive components, like subway trains that can run over your opponent, windows for defenestration.
Here, you like this wall? Enjoy it. Holy shit! Oh, what the fuck?
Rowdy onlookers who'll hold you down as you get stomped, and tons of other fun stuff. FFNY took what made the first game so successful and iterated on it in every way imaginable, coming up with a product that was even better than the first game. Oh, and Ghostface Killah got his golden bird. Not only that, but Fight for New York is still played today. At CEO 2022, 23, and 24, players came from all around the world to compete in Def Jam.
That was some Slumdog Millionaire type joint right there, bro.
With 2024 being commentated by none other than Yipes and Ringe.
Okay, bye-bye, 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 bye-bye. Bye, King Joe. Oh, just in time.
Legally, we have to mention that there is a third game in the series, Def Jam Icon, which took place on the West Coast. But that game was really, really bad, so we won't go any further. It's like the third Godfather movie. Just pretend it didn't happen.
Fucking forget about it.
Today, the Def Jam trilogy, or at least 2/3 of it, is lauded as a once-in-a-lifetime video game. It so clearly distilled the culture of early 2000s hip-hop, video games, and pro wrestling that if anyone who grew up during this time were to pick up the game and play it for the first time, they'd be guaranteed to go on a nostalgia trip. Those involved in the process of making the game remember it fondly. Redman said, quote, "It was great to see that my own label had their own video game and put their own artists in it. And the ill part about it was that it wasn't corny. It was very exceptional in the gaming industry." Method Man, DMX, Luda, and many others shared similar sentiments, excited to be immortalized in a video game. Unfortunately, it's unlikely that a game like this could ever be made again today.
People want to bring back Def Jam Vendetta, and I said so many people ask me why this game hasn't been brought back for newer consoles. Maybe because they'd have to pay for voice and music rights again. Maybe.
The legal issues around getting 40, 50, maybe 60 artists in a video game together, the amount you'd have to pay in royalties to use their likeness, and the fact that there really isn't any demand for a hip-hop fighting game based on the WWE means that the Def Jam video games are likely an artifact that will stay in the past. Still, the Def Jam series is remembered fondly and holds up to this day.
Hey yo, little tip, try blocking with your hands instead of your face, bitch.
Shout out and thanks to Cloud, Steph, B, Pass, Shampoo, and Yashichi for being top patrons of the channel. If you enjoyed the video, leaving a like, subscribing, and hitting the bell to stay up to date is much appreciated. My name is Jonah, thanks for watching.